The year is 1914. Europe, a tapestry of ancient rivalries and simmering tensions, erupts. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand ignites a powder keg. Nations mobilize with unprecedented speed and ferocity. The Great War had begun. Millions of young men, driven by patriotism and propaganda, answered their nation's calls to arms. Little did they know the horrors that awaited them. This war would claim millions of lives and redraw the map of Europe. This is a story of that war, a story of courage, sacrifice, and resilience. James Thompson was just a boy when the war began. He was barely old enough to understand the gravity of the situation, but he could sense the change in the air. He lived in a small town amidst the rolling hills of the English countryside. Life was simple, peaceful. The days were filled with the sounds of nature, the laughter of children, and the hum of daily life.
James, with his unruly brown hair and piercing blue eyes, was a dreamer. He often found himself lost in thought, imagining worlds far beyond the confines of his small town. He yearned for adventure, for a life beyond his small town. The horizon always seemed to call to him, whispering promises of unknown lands and untold stories. He devoured tales of heroism, ignited by stories of knights and explorers. Each book he read fueled his desire to become a part of something greater, to be a hero in his own right.
The war at first seemed distant, a storm on a far-off shore. It was something that happened to other people, in other places. But as casualty lists grew, the war crept closer, casting a long shadow. The names of the fallen were no longer strangers. They were neighbors, friends, and family. Then, a recruitment poster appeared. "Your king and country need you." It was a call that resonated deeply within James, stirring something in his soul. For James, it was a call to arms. He saw it as his chance to be part of the grand adventure he had always dreamed of, to step into the stories he had read and become a hero himself. The decision was made. He would join the fight, not just for his country, but for the ideals and dreams that had shaped his young life. The recruitment office buzzed with nervous energy. Young men, faces etched with fear and excitement, whispered to one another.
James, heart-pounding, joined the queue.
The recruiting officer, a gruff man with a walrus mustache, processed recruits with bored indifference. Basic training was a rude awakening. Days were long and arduous, filled with drills, marches, and rifle fire. Farm boys' hands hardened, calloused from handling rifles and digging trenches. They were no longer boys, they were soldiers, forged in the crucible of war. The train rattled towards the front lines, carrying its human cargo towards an uncertain fate.
James, pale, stared out the window as the landscape scarred by war.
The Battle of the Somme, July 1st, 1916. At 7:30 a.m., a deafening artillery barrage erupted along the German lines.
James and his comrades, faces grimy, eyes wide with fear, scrambled out of the trenches. They advanced through a hellish landscape. Exploding shells rained down, tearing men to pieces. Machine gun fire ripped through the air, cutting down soldiers. Amidst the chaos, James stumbled upon a wounded comrade, a choice that would forever alter his life.
The trenches, a labyrinthine network of ditches, dugouts, and barbed wire.
A world unto themselves, a subterranean realm of mud, blood, and despair.
The air, heavy with the sweetness of rotting flesh and the reek of human waste, clung to the throat.
Rats, fattened on corpses, scurried through the trenches. Lice burrowed into clothing, feasting on exhausted men. Sleep was fitful, haunted by nightmares of battle.
Yet amidst the horrors, camaraderie flourished.
Soldiers, bound by shared hardship, formed bonds of brotherhood.
They shared rations, hopes, and fears. They sang songs, told stories, and clung to each other for support.
In the dim light of a flickering candle, James sought solace in the written word, finding comfort in each stroke of the pen.
Letters from home, precious lifelines, offered a brief respite from the horrors of the trenches.
He devoured news of his family and friends, clinging to every word.
His own letters home were carefully crafted, omitting the horrors he had witnessed on the battlefield.
He wrote of camaraderie and simple pleasures, shielding his loved ones from the darkness.
So he wrote of bravery and sacrifice, shielding them from the darkness that threatened to consume him entirely.
The war, like a raging fire, eventually subsided, leaving behind a scarred landscape. The echoes of gunfire and the cries of the wounded faded into silence, but the devastation remained. The once vibrant fields were now barren, littered with remnants of conflict. The air, once filled with the sounds of life, now carried the heavy weight of loss and destruction. Survivors returned home, forever marked by their experiences. They carried with them the invisible wounds of war, etched deeply into their souls. The joy of reuniting with loved ones was often overshadowed by the haunting memories of the battlefield. Each step they took on familiar ground felt foreign, as if they were strangers in their own homeland.
I was physically unscathed, but forever altered by the horrors I had witnessed. The images of fallen comrades and the sounds of their final breaths were seared into my mind. I walked through life with a heavy heart, burdened by the weight of survival. The battlefield had taken a piece of me that I could never reclaim.
He was haunted by nightmares, vivid flashbacks, and the stench of blood and decay. Sleep offered no respite, as the horrors of war invaded his dreams. The line between reality and memory blurred, leaving him trapped in a perpetual state of fear and anxiety. The battlefield was never far from his mind, a constant reminder of the trauma he endured. The diagnosis was shell shock, now known as PTSD. It was a condition that baffled doctors and left soldiers feeling isolated and misunderstood. The medical community struggled to comprehend the depth of their suffering, often attributing it to mere cowardice or weakness. The term shell shock barely scratched the surface of the profound psychological impact of war. It was a condition little understood, often dismissed as weakness. The stigma surrounding mental health made it difficult for soldiers to seek help. They were expected to be stoic, to bury their pain and carry on. But the invisible wounds festered, growing deeper with each passing day. The lack of understanding and support only compounded their suffering.
I struggled to reconcile the man I had been with the stranger I had become. The war had changed me in ways I couldn't articulate. I felt disconnected from my former self, as if I were living in someone else's skin. The person who had once been full of life and hope was now a shadow, haunted by the past. With the stranger I had become. The memories of the battlefield were a constant presence, lurking in the corners of my mind. I found it difficult to engage with the world around me, to find joy in the things I once loved. The war had left an indelible mark on my soul, one that I feared would never fade. I was plagued by guilt, haunted by the faces of those I couldn't save. Their eyes stared back at me in my dreams, a silent accusation that I couldn't escape. The weight of their loss pressed down on me, a constant reminder of my perceived failures. I questioned my worth, my purpose, and whether I deserved to have survived when so many had not. I was tormented by the memories I couldn't escape. They followed me like a shadow, darkening even the brightest moments. The war had ended, but the battle within me raged on. Each day was a struggle to find peace, to reclaim a sense of normalcy. But the specter of PTSD loomed large, a constant reminder of the price of survival.
The train pulled into the station, its whistle a mournful cry.
I saw my family, their faces etched with joy and concern. I embraced my mother, her familiar scent a source of comfort and pain.
He was home, yet he felt adrift, a stranger in a land that no longer felt his own. The transition back to civilian life was fraught with challenges. The rhythms of farm life now felt alien and burdensome.
I found solace in solitude, wandering the hills. The world of men seemed distant and irrelevant. The horrors I had witnessed made everything else seem trivial.
The war had cast a long shadow over James's life. He carried the invisible scars of war, deeper than any bullet wound.
I struggled to find my place in a world that seemed to have moved on. I found it difficult to relate to those who had not shared my experiences.
He withdrew, seeking solace in the company of fellow veterans. He found purpose in honoring the memory of fallen comrades. The war had forged within him a resilience, a strength of spirit that allowed him to endure. The years passed, each one carrying James further from the battlefields of his youth. Yet the memories of those days never faded. They were etched into his mind, as vivid as the day they happened. The faces of his comrades, the sounds of battle, and the feeling of loss stayed with him, a constant reminder of the price of freedom.
I dedicated my life to ensuring that the sacrifices of my generation would never be forgotten. Every year, I stand here, at this memorial, to honor those who gave everything. It's not just about remembering the past, but about teaching future generations the value of peace and the cost of war. I became an advocate for veterans, tirelessly campaigning for their recognition and support. We fought not just for our country, but for each other. And when the war ended, our fight for dignity and respect continued. We lobbied for better healthcare, for mental health support, and for the recognition of the invisible scars that many of us carried.
The First World War left an indelible mark on human history. It was a conflict that reshaped nations, altered borders, and changed the course of history. Millions of lives were lost, and countless others were forever changed. The War to End All Wars, as it was called, showed the world the true horrors of modern warfare. It shattered illusions of glory and exposed the brutal realities of modern warfare. The trenches, the gas attacks, the endless bombardments. These were the new face of war. It was no longer about honor and valor, but about survival and endurance. The stories of those who lived through it are a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As we remember the centenary of the armistice, let us reflect on the sacrifices made by James and countless others, their bravery, their suffering, and their unwavering commitment to their comrades and their country. They fought for a better world, and it is our duty to ensure that their legacy lives on. Let their stories serve as a reminder of the human cost of war. Each name on a memorial, each grave in a cemetery, represents a life cut short, a family left grieving, and a future unfulfilled. These stories are not just history, they are a part of who we are and who we must strive to be. A call for peace and a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. Lest we forget. In remembering, we honor their sacrifice and reaffirm our commitment to a world where such sacrifices are never again necessary. Peace is not just the absence of war, but the presence of justice, of understanding, and of compassion. Let us work together to build a future worthy of their legacy.